fight downtown about a week ago Thursday after school, a few different fights that happened. And they were something that we were very concerned about. The dean spent a lot of time on Thursday night working with the police trying to identify who was involved in those fights. This is Thursday, this is not the big one, this is the day before, the night before. Who was involved in those fights, and we spent a lot of time on Friday working on that and met with a group of students. And Sergeant Peasley can talk to this a little bit, but basically warned them, like, you know, you need to knock it off, you need to stay out of downtown, you need to not continue with the fights, and it was a very strong warning for these students. So at 2:30 on Friday afternoon, there was a fight right outside the Freshman Academy area with students that had nothing to do with those students we had just talked to. It was a totally unrelated situation. So as you know, a lot of students leave school on that side, the 1922 building and the Freshman Academy. A lot of students exit that side of the building. The fight happened right after school. There's a lot of students around. One student was injured. He came into the school, we took care of him, and a couple of students were arrested. That big group of students that were all hanging around Friday afternoon at the end of school all kind of stayed together. They really had no rhyme or reason to each other than that they were all together and they just saw a fight and it's Friday afternoon. And let's all move as a big, it's like an amoeba, let's all move together downtown. Now some of them were actually going downtown to get picked up or meet friends or do different things, but they all kind of moved as a crowd. And when they moved as a crowd downtown, they started getting very unruly and refused to disperse. So there were, I would say, between 100 to 200 students, more or less. I mean, I didn't count all of them, but it was a lot of students. And there were also kids that had nothing to do with Lowell High School that were down there. I want you to remember that. So it wasn't all Lowell High School students that were down there. It was a mixture of students. But when they got down there, and again, I think Sergeant Peasley is going to talk a little bit more to this, but when they got down there, they refused to disperse. They refused to listen to the police. They got out of hand, and when the police were trying to move them on, they started getting even more feisty and getting very unruly, very disrespectful, very disruptive. And in my words, it was disgusting. It was disgusting what happened down there. Anyone that looks at the video of what happened downtown, my stomach was in knots for days. Because I think it was here at Lowell High School, it was here in Lowell that this happened. We've seen things across the country on the news, but this is happening right here in our own city with many of our own Lowell High School students, and some of the things that they were saying to the police, and punching police officers, kicking them, abusing them. My heart was so hurting for the police because they were trying to do the right thing down there. And the students were just, I don't know, it was a mob scene. They all sort of ganged up on the police and they just wouldn't stop. So I think, some of what happened after that. I know we did use pepper spray on students. Took quite a while for that crowd to disperse. I know that all of these folks came out of their offices from Merrimack Street. I was down there with the deans and dozens and dozens of police officers and police cars. Even area towns were called in, Chelmsford and Drake and Westford and a few other towns. So it was quite a scene, nothing to be proud of at all. And it was very, very, very disturbing to be down there and see what some of our kids were doing. So after that, so that's that one really, really big incident. But after that, and I know you know this because I sent a call home, we had a posting on social media that was totally unrelated to that situation. It was really a student thinking they're funny, and they posted on social media with a BB gun saying, "Don't go to school." But that was in the middle of this whole thing, so it was like, trust me, calling parents to tell them about that, and it was totally unrelated to the other thing, but it was like, when is this week gonna ever end, right? So that situation got addressed immediately, and I'm not going to talk about consequences for that, but you can be rest assured we went to the full extent of consequences for that student. And then again on Friday, I had to call you about the minivan person. And that was just really to alert you to make sure that students were aware going home to watch out for the guy in the black minivan. And we've had a few fights inside the school. But I want to say this about that, is that this is my 4th high school that I've worked at. This is the biggest city high school that I've worked at. And this happens, these kinds of things happen in high schools all across the United States, and I know you don't want to hear that, but it does. And we go through cycles, and we will get through this. Our students, 98% of our students, are so better than this. There's always those few students that are causing a ruckus, and obviously we have to deal with that. But the students here, the whole reason I came here was because of the students at Lowell High School. They're amazing. You walk through the halls, they're so courteous and so respectful, but there's always that small number of students that we're not proud of right now, but we're going to try to work through that. So a couple notes on what we're doing. So I met personally with all of the deans. We met with every single student that was involved in that situation on Thursday and Friday. Whether or not they were arrested, they were seen on hours and hours and hours of video, or we personally saw them being unruly. We met with that's all pretty much what we did last week. We met as a whole team to make sure that parents understood the severity of the situation. All those students were addressed with very serious consequences, and we have some plans for when they come back. Some students did come back today, I'm going to be honest, some did come back today, and we have plans for them. So we do have guidelines in the Parent and Safety Handbook that's online. Anybody that wants to read those, we have to follow those. Those are set by the school committee and also set by the law that we have to follow. So if you want to check that out, you can do that. Some things that we're doing here to try to prevent safety issues is one, I don't know for anybody that's driving by in the morning, all of the deans and myself are outside the school. We're greeting students every day. And some people say, well, what's the big deal with that? Well, the big deal with that is that we can check the pulse of the school as the students are walking in. We're greeting students, we're checking in with students, seeing how they're doing and seeing who's having a good day, bad day before they even walk in the school. It's very important. The other thing is IDs. We are very, very, what should I say, strict on wearing the IDs, in that every student and every adult in the building has to wear their IDs. This way any of us, any adult or administration can look around very quickly and see who doesn't belong in our high school. So every day I've been making announcements pretty much since school started. I've missed a few days, but mostly every day. Do you have your ID on? Is your ID on? And we deal with students that don't have their IDs on. We also ask students not to wear earbuds because that's a huge safety issue if we're trying to give instructions to students. So we ask them not to even walk in the school with them. We are also working with staff to educate them what to do in case of emergency. We've had a very strong presence on Kirk Street since this big incident took place. There's been lots and lots of police officers, admin, and even people from Youth Tech there to help support the safe exit of students out of the building at the end of the day. But one other thing we're doing, we started the year off talking about relationships. And relationships with students is very, very important because that's where you build trust with students, and that's where they come and they talk to you about maybe what's going on, see something, say something. It's about respect, and a lot of us spent the first couple of days of school talking about our story and why we're here and why this school is important to us and why they're important to us. So I think that's so important, is building those relationships. Once you build relationships with students, usually they will respect you and do anything for you. So that's something we're really working on. And then a couple last thoughts. We do have social workers in every house office, and we have a lot of support programs to help students that are struggling. Like we said, we're doing a lot of education around see something and say something, and also emergency drills and safety plans for students. We've been talking as a team is what do we do with this underlying theme with some students that they don't think they have to listen to us, and they don't think they have to listen to the police, which really blows me away. You know, I'm gonna be honest, we had some students in our meetings that said they don't have to listen to us and they don't have to listen to the police. Guess what? That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work in our school. The safety of everyone in our school trumps any rights any student has. If we are trying to keep a safe environment, their rights are no longer going to be listened to if we're trying to move students along, if we're trying to keep students safe. And that's a message that you all can help with. Obviously you're here and you're concerned, but that message that safety trumps all rights, right? Like downtown, trying to disperse that crowd that was very, very scary. Students felt like, why should I move? I said, well, the police told you to move. I don't have to listen to the police. That's really scary. So trust me, we're working on that. So one of the things that we talked about was maybe having a speaker series, having a lot of education, because that's what we do, education around student rights and what they have to do and what they don't have to do. But that is the crux of what happened downtown. The students felt like they didn't have to move, that they had every right in the world to be there, regardless of yelling at the cops or punching the police or not dispersing. So we're working on that. I mean, I have more, but I want to make sure I leave time for you guys to ask questions. I'm going to turn it over to